Let's welcome my next guest. He's a Republican from Ohio. He's also a doctor. He's Congressman Brad Wenstrup. Great to have you on, sir.
Thanks, Liz. Good to be with you. Appreciate it.
Your reaction to the seemingly good news right now. We're not out of the woods, but it seems like it's good news.
Well, it does seem like it's good news, and you want to see the numbers go down. You know, the goal all along has been to beat the models, right? You would hear all these models about how bad it's going to get, and you saw the models of what happened in other countries where it went right up, very high. A lot of people died and came down. We were trying to stay under that and keep our healthcare system in check and not overrun. So this is good news because that's what we've been after all along, is to come in under, start to see the trend to go down.
You know, sir, do you think the United States has finally answered the wake-up call? Because ever since the 1980s AIDS crisis, infectious disease experts have testified to Congress and warned the government about pandemics. We saw that happening through SARS, through MERS, certainly through Ebola and Zika. Now the president is saying one of the toughest decisions of his life is reopening the country, possibly on May 1st. Americans may wake up to a brand new world of having to wear masks to go into work, maybe they're at their jobs. They may be tested for coronavirus, maybe new apps on their iPhones and phones to track them if they're near somebody with COVID-19. Apple and Google is talking about that. Do you think finally that Congress and the government has answered the wake-up call that's been ringing for years, that this is that we're in an age of basically a jet stream of viruses going around the world? Have we answered the wake-up call for once?
Well, I certainly hope so. If we haven't learned lessons from this, I don't know if we ever will. I mean, if you think about it, it's very important that we know who and what is coming across our border if we're going to be protecting ourselves. That's one thing. And certainly we have people in politics that think the border should just be wide open. That's the wrong answer. You know, you go to other countries and they ask you all kinds of questions about your health and where you've been, et cetera, et cetera. So there'll be many new normals, but there'll be a lot of medical scientific process new normals. How we go about evaluating something and checking whether something is growing larger than you might have thought it was going to be, and how we go about handling that, how quickly we try to nip things in the bud, who's most vulnerable, who might need to be quarantined. Those types of processes will take place. But also, we've learned some lessons, too, about how we will have to manage our supply chain, right? I mean, it is imperative a national security issue.
Yeah, that's true, to bring it back home. There's also, a lesson to be learned, and stop politicizing everything. Doctors and hospital workers saying stop it. They don't want everything politicized. They're saying stop the finger pointing, have the focus on where the viruses are coming out of, and that's China. So the issue here is that we've got these gruesome wet markets still up and running, possibly. Great Britain says they're still in China. China says they've cracked down. They've outlawed many of the wet markets. The other officials are saying no. Here's the issue. The president said he's going to decide next week whether or not to cut funding to the World Health Organization. Why should U.S. taxpayers be funding the WHO when it's spreading Chinese propaganda?
You know, it kind of reminds me of the NATO model, where there was a certain level of responsibility that comes with everybody who's in it. And the president was big on that. It's the same thing here as far as I'm concerned. The World Health Organization is designed to try and allow us to nip things in the bud so that we can act as one set of human beings on this earth that are trying to cut out disease, et cetera, et cetera. You have to be honest. The problem with the communist system is similar to what Russia did after Chernobyl, right? Their attitude is, in the communist system, is it's not a lie if it helps the state, and they don't want to admit to when there's a problem, and as a result, other people suffer. So this is something we do want to address wholeheartedly. There's no doubt about it that we have got to do something to address, and I think a lot of it should come from the World Health Organization itself, and I think the president is one who's going to help drive that.
Yeah, here's the issue now. The WHO is saying that it's taking North Korea's line, that North Korea has no cases. That cannot be believed. The line of rhetoric that we're hearing out in the media that, other administrations' pandemic response were state-of-the-art and cinematically picture-perfect. We are learning that they were not certainly in prior administrations. dating back to the 1980s. The pandemic response on the federal and the state and local level was not up to speed. So when you look at what's going on with the World Health Organization, you look at the rhetoric coming out of China. Now the American Enterprise Institute is saying potentially 2.9 million infections in China, way more than the 81,000 cases that China is reporting. So it seems that finally the world may be waking up. We're seeing social media lighting up in Bangladesh and Afghanistan and again in Pakistan, also in Russia, against what's going on in China. Do you think the world's waking up and saying we can't go through another pandemic like this?
Well, it'd be helpful if it's other countries besides just the United States. And I'll give you an example. One of my medical colleagues have been in touch with a infectious disease doc in China, going over what they've done and this and that. And one of the things that the Chinese doctor said to my friend was, how come you all aren't wearing masks in America? Well, the reason is, you have them. And you're not selling them to us, and that was a problem, and that goes back to the supply chain. But again, what they will do to their own people and keep them in the dark, they're trying to do to the world. But the world is waking up, and we're on our way. We're doing really well here, I think, as far as if you look at HIV, it was 4 years before we had a reliable clinical test. We're moving much faster. We're going to get better at this. Hopefully this doesn't keep happening. But also, I just would like to point out now one of the opportunities that we have on the medical side is we have a lot of people that have gotten this and have recovered, and they are going to be eligible people to donate plasma that can help others that get this. And I think people need to make sure they're talking with their doctors and working with their blood banks.
Yeah, and the issue is, too, should the president, is the use of the Defense Production Act, to what you were saying, should that be a first step toward getting the medical supply chain built and manufacturing here in the United States? Because China is moving to be a medical superpower via a new medical Belt and Road initiative. It tried to corner the market on remdesivir and Gilead, that drug earlier in this year in January. It tried to get as many ventilators as it could before it told the world it had an epidemic on its hand that turned into a pandemic. That's the thing. Here's what I want to back up and say. When you see what's happening out of China, Dr. Robert Darling is one of the world's leading infectious disease experts out of Fort Detrick. He used to be at Fort Detrick, the Army Research Center. He's still saying China won't give over the virus samples to study. That tells you that it could possibly have been an accidental release out of a biolab there, or they just don't want to admit, China doesn't want to admit that the virus did emanate out of, the province over there. So the issue with China, should it be brought to the Criminal Court of Justice? Should we cut back on our debt that we owe to it? How do you hold China accountable? Those are some of the ideas that Republicans are pushing on now. What do you think?
I think we need to pursue that avenue and see exactly what happened. I mean, there's responsibility. We have had terrorist attacks where certain countries eventually did take responsibility, like Libya, and we were able to get some compensation back. That would certainly help us, but it also might correct a wrong. But I don't expect them to change their behavior, but we have to change how we view China and how we work with China, or better yet, maybe how we don't work with China because they can't be trusted.
Okay, Congressman Brad Wenstrup of Ohio, thank you so much for joining us, sir. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you bet. Thank you. You have a good Easter and happy Passover as well. Thank you.
You too. Thank you so much. Okay.